Hey everybody, today we're going to talk a bit about privacy. And although boudoir photography really isn't like a shocking thing as it used to be 25, 30 years ago, people still want privacy when it comes to their photos. Now, I know you can go on any social media platform today, Instagram, TikTok, and see women posting photos of themselves in their underwear. It's not like even like a really big thing now, but there are many women who come in to do boudoir sessions who may be teachers, work in larger companies, whatever their job is, and they don't necessarily want their photos out there. They want to keep that stuff private for themselves or for their partners. So you may assume that just going to any photographer, automatically your information and your photos are going to be private, but that really wouldn't be the case. So today, what I want to talk about are three things that it's really important for any woman going in to do a session with a boudoir photographer really needs to do some homework and ask some hard questions. And the first one is outsourcing. The second one are like little sneaky photo releases that photographers have in their contracts. And the third one is just really digital privacy. So outsourcing has become a bigger and bigger thing over the past few years with photographers, not just boudoir photographers, but pretty much all photographers. And what is happening is, editing photos is a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. So many photographers were looking for an easier way to get their sessions and their jobs done. And over the past few years, there have been some AI editing services that have come around. And, if you're a wedding photographer and one of those people takes like 4,000 pictures during the course of the day, it can take a lot of time to go through all those pictures and pick out the ones where Uncle Harry is blinking and squinting. And, so going through 4,000 photos and editing them can be like a nightmare. I'm glad I never had to do that at all. So that has been an up and coming thing over the past several years with photographers getting involved in these AI services. But there are also photographers that outsource their image editing, meaning they'll go and hire somebody on Fiverr or maybe another gig website, pay them a couple bucks, and they'll do some photo editing. So why is this a bad thing? Well, again, when we talk about this privacy, if a photographer is using sort of an AI to edit their photos, not to say that, it's probably not going to be the most artistic thing, but they're taking your private pictures, sending them out to a computer somewhere, and who knows, we really have to investigate the privacy policies or what happens to those pictures. Does this company hold them? Do they own the rights to them? Can they get hacked and your pictures wind up everywhere? That's something to think of. But the more concerning thing to me was always the photographers outsourcing to another individual. And the really scary thing about this is they may not even tell you. So after your boudoir session is complete, again, they go on to Fiverr, find some photo editor who could be in China or the Mideast or God knows where, pay them a couple dollars, and then they're taking all of your private photos and sending them over to this person to do the editing. And who really knows what happens to them after that job? They're out there. That person could do whatever they want with those photos. I mean, not to mention that every time if you hire a different person, there's going to be a big inconsistency in the way that these photos look from person to person. But, that's a really concerning thing that someone halfway around the world has all your private photos on their laptop. And an even bigger concern is that the photographer probably never told you that she or he was doing this. So, is it a possibility that things work out okay? Yeah. But it's also a real risk and a real breach of privacy that they're sending them these photos out to someone halfway around the world without telling you. So that's one real big issue going on in photography today, and every woman needs to be very vigilant and asking about this. And another big risk to your privacy is that there are photographers out there with some pretty wonky photo contracts. And if you ever booked a photo session now, most are using these online booking services. And you'll pay your deposit or pay your session fee. You'll be presented with a very long session contract, and it asks for a digital signature in there. And if you're not real careful, there could be a photo release lurking in those hundreds of words. And kind of like when you download new software, it gets all these terms and no one ever reads that, they just agree to it. I think that's what happens with a lot of photo sessions too. These photographers use these long contracts and customers really aren't paying too much attention, just signing off on them. And in there is a photo release that gives that photographer to right to use your personal photos again for their marketing. And it's a sneaky way to go ahead and get pictures without really getting someone's approval. And the truth of the matter is, and I know this for a fact, that some photographers don't even realize that they're doing this. Because what they're doing is taking sort of templated contracts, or they're just copy and pasting and putting them into the CMS that they use, probably not even really reading it very well. So they may not even realize that it's in there. And again, it's not that they sort of have nefarious kind of intentions with your photos, but it's in there. So others, I think, really do put it in there just to cover themselves in case something leaks, in case something happens. They can say, well, we had a photo release in our contract. So it's really super important that when you're booking your session, especially if you're booking sort of on like an online CMS, that you read through there and see if there's a photo release section or something talking about, I release these photos for perpetuity, for whatever use the photographer wants. And then really don't complete your booking if you see something like that. I would be reaching out right away to that photographer and then saying, hey, I'm not really down. And they may say, well, some people after the session, they really like to donate some photos, and so we just take care of that up front. And you may not be comfortable with that. And so that brings you to a decision. And you can either ask them to remove it, or it's time to choose another photographer. So that's another real thing that women need to be very sort of vigilant of when booking online, to make sure there aren't any sneaky sort of photo releases in photo contracts, and get them removed or find another photographer. And the third thing I want to talk about is digital security. Now, a lot of people spend a lot of time preparing for their photos ahead of time, or their sessions, getting lingerie, getting their hair and makeup done. It's a whole big to-do. Then they do their session, and then they get their photo book, and they have a great gift afterwards. But not a lot of people spend a lot of time considering what happens to those pictures after your session is done and completed. Where are they going? What's happening to them? And shockingly, I could tell you, very, very few photographers have any information about this on their websites. What happens? What do they do? Do your photos just sit on a laptop somewhere in perpetuity? And actually, I remember seeing this story a couple of years ago about how that just happened. And there was a woman who was a boudoir photographer, and apparently she got into a fight with her boyfriend, I guess, who purchased this MacBook for her. So they wound up splitting up. The boyfriend took the laptop back, put it on eBay and sold it. And on that laptop was all of these people's photos. And so that laptop was sold to somebody, and I'm sure they opened it up, and there was a bunch of pictures on there that they probably weren't expecting. And the boyfriend, I guess, got some money for that and a little bit of revenge for selling that laptop, but no one in that situation was thinking about the customers, and now their data is sort of everywhere. So it's really super important that your photographer sort of has a plan of what happens with those photos after a session is completed. And if they don't, you really need to ask. And typically, it's going to be one of two things. And neither of them is right or wrong. It just is a little bit of preference on how a photographer wants to operate. And one thing, maybe they have a policy that after a project is completed, photo books are delivered or everything is done, that they just delete the photos. And that's fine. You know, they may just get rid of it. They don't want the liability of hanging on to those pictures, nor the cost of archiving them and saving them and buying external hard drives, which is a mess and it's a lot of money. You know, the other option is photographers may want to save all of those photos, you know, for the future. And there's a benefit to that too, because it's happened to me where years down the line, I've had people reach out to me that I've worked with years and years ago that they had some kind of a flood in their house, or they got a divorce and they lost the photo book or wound up with the other partner during the process of the divorce and they wanted to get another copy. So I was able to unarchive these photos and go ahead and get them a new copy of that photo book, which they really appreciated. But in an instance like what I do, what I've always done, is if I'm hanging on to somebody's photos, everything gets encrypted, you know, which in the event that things get stolen or lost or taken or anything happens, those photos are pretty much practically useless to anybody else. There's no way they can access them or get into them. So before you book that session with that photographer, you need to be really, really sure what's going to happen to those photos after that session. They're either going to be deleting them or encrypting them. And those are the only two acceptable answers. If they say something like, well, or no one's ever asked me that, or they don't really have much of an answer, you know, that may not be your best choice as a photographer. So, you know, you may think that just because somebody wakes up one morning and decides to call themselves a pro, that they're really on the ball or they're really looking out for your privacy or security, and they're not. And it's just really boils down to sometimes a lack of experience and business professionalism and just not knowing. But in the world of boudoir photography, is working with somebody like that really worth the risk? And as I said before, you know, often they're not going to post these things on their website. They're not going to put on there anywhere about, I outsource all my photos, or I don't do anything. Just leave your photos lingering on my hard drive after a session. These are things they're not going to be promoting. And like I said, when it comes to encryption or something like that, odds are they may not even know or care. So what can you do? Well, this is where you really need to be vigilant when you're going and booking any women's photographer, especially. And as I noted before, they're not going to mention any of these things on a website, basically. And if you do, it's kind of a rare, if you do see it, it's kind of a rare thing. So what you have to do is ask some questions. And this is really all you can do. Talk to that photographer or email them. Ask her if she's outsourcing photos. And if the answer is yes, I think hard about working with that particular photographer. Ask if you can see a copy of their photo contract, or if they ask them if they are including photo releases with their session bookings. And if I were you, I wouldn't be signing with somebody who has a blanket release in my photo contract. And again, like I said before, they may not even realize that it's there. And again, is that really someone you want to be trusting your private photos with? And then when it comes to digital security, you'll often get blank stares and kind of like, kind of looks if you start asking somebody about digital security when it comes to their photos. And again, it's not a great answer. And most photographers are going to be wholly unprepared to answer any of your questions that you have about that. But ignorance isn't a great strategy going in to work with a photographer like that. So one of the things I would certainly be asking them is, what happens to my photos after the session is done? And just see what they have to say. If they have a plan, you know, great. If they look at you again with a blank stare or have no answer, not a great probably option for you to choose. I don't know. I know it wouldn't be worth it for me. So, as you can see, you know, there are some steps that you really need to take when you're going to book a photographer. And, you know, you can't rely on somebody. You may work out great for you, but at the same time, the photographer could really be lacking some steps there to secure your privacy. And then that's on you. So, that's what I got for you today, and hopefully that was helpful. We want everyone to have fun, but we want their sessions to be safe and secure. And you have to be more vigilant than you think when it comes to working with a photographer. So as you can see, I'm out here in the woods again today. It's a beautiful day. It's been bad weather, so you can hear me breathing a little harder than I normally do. So hopefully the weather stays good and I can get out here and build up my cardio a bit again. So thanks for tuning in. Hope this video was valuable for you, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.